right, so last weekend I played in my 7th over the board tournament, and it was a 15 by 5 minute Swiss tournament, 4 rounds, and there's like two prize pools. So the first is people over 1200, and then the people under 1200. Depending on where you rank in those age brackets, determines who wins, basically. So without further ado, let's begin. We're looking at our first game here. I'm playing against a 1542 ranked guy. He's a guy I've played a couple of times, actually. He's an older gentleman, so he's been around the block a few times. And I come in and I start with e4, knowing full well that he is a Sicilian player. And I just go into my kings in the attack, but then he pushes into d5, which I don't think I've ever really come across in the Sicilians. It threw me for a loop. And so I actually took a lot of time here to try to figure out what my best move was. And so I decided to just take here on d5, and he brought the queen over, which I've also never seen. He's looking at my rook, and there's really no way to play it other than to go queen to f3. He's not happy about that, he says. He brings the knight out here. And since he didn't want to trade the queens, I'm like, this guy's way better than me. I'm just going to take his queen off the board. He's going to take that off. And then I'm going to push here to prevent this knight from coming to b4, looking to fork later on. So after he does that, he brings the other knight out. I just develop my bishop. He pushes the pawn to develop his bishop. I just get my knights out. He brings that back just in case I do take that knight. I just develop my knight instead. And then he's looking to fianchetto out of his bishop. So at this point, I take. I think it's fine. But he takes with the pawn, which I thought was very weird. I have a slight advantage at this point. So I push this pawn open to get this bishop out. He fianchettos his bishop. I then castle. I realize once this bishop's here, it's x-raying this, so I cannot really move this bishop until I get it in a safer position. He castles. I bring out this knight here, looking to attack this pawn. He doubles up the pawn there. I bring the rook out. He brings the rook to defend that pawn. This is where the clash is right here on d5. So I take the bishop. I think taking that bishop and giving myself the bishop pair is better for me in the long run. He takes the pawn and I take the rook. So I win a pawn and I'm kind of still putting pressure on this. I need to be able to move this bishop though. These are the things that I'm thinking of. He pushes his knight over there to f5 and I push my pawn here so that I can free my bishop up. He brings that d4 there and I push this in, closing this bishop, making it a lot weaker of a bishop. So he gets his rook over here. I'm thinking he's looking to double up. I just get my bishop out. He doubles up. I double up the rooks. So at this point, I'm up a good amount, six points. I don't feel like I am. I feel like it's a very even game at this point. He pushes up to b6, completing the pawn chain. I bring my bishop out, looking to pin this king to the rook to the king. Pushing here. If he takes, I take there, and we're basically we're killing it at that point. He moves the king instead. I continue with my plan. Figure great. He brings the knight out, rooks out. I take the rooks off the board because I played him in rook endgames before and he knows all his rook endgames. Anything I can do to equalize, the best. I put this bishop here, looking to get the nice checkmate here. He obviously tries to prevent that. Now my best move here is actually going bishop to d2, but I decide to exchange the bishops as well. Instead, he brings the knight out and I just try to get my king in the game. I'm pushing up pawns, trying to make sure that I can get as much as I can. I'm trying to get the knight off. I'm trading up. The problem is, as I'm pushing, I'm realizing my bishop's a light squared bishop and all his pawns are here on dark squares. So he moves the knight and I just try to, try not to prevent his knight from getting back here. Because if the knight gets back here, it's game over. And so we just repeat moves. He offers a draw. And I draw in the first game against a 1550 player. I was pretty happy with the start of that. Florida Meth, good to see you, man. I'm feeling good. 15 out here blundering pawns. Hey, man, I'll take it. He had a bad day. The rest of it. I talked to him at the tournament. He's like, yeah, it was like my worst tournament I've played in a while. I think he ended up with 1.5. So I finished with the first one with a draw, which puts you in a weird spot in a Swiss game. It's it doesn't know whether it puts you in a winner's bracket or a loser's bracket. If you guys have been following me on my recaps for a while, I move on to the 12-year-old girl that I continue to lose to time and time again. She's a 1276 and she is white in this situation. So she goes with e4. When we played the first time, we played an advanced variation. So I said, great, let's get there. I was winning at that point. I go into my advanced, this Botanovic Karl's defense, which I'm very comfortable with. I'm just developing how I normally do. Everything's great. She tries to prevent my knight from coming over here to b4. I bring this queen over here, because I now have, once I eliminate this knight, I take the knight, they take back, I take the pawn here, they take back, and then I can take with the queen. And that's exactly what happens after they push b4. I take with the queen because I want to trade the queens off the board. that happens, I basically control the centers pretty well, and I have it a 2.5 or almost a 3-point lead here according to the engine. She castles. I take the bishop, disrupt that structure even more. My lead has now grown to about 4.5. I then just developed the knight, trying to get it out. And I'm looking at the engine here. G5 apparently was the move. I don't know why. I think it's just to open up the rook if the bishop does take. Instead, I go knight to c6 here, looking to take this pawn. I'm completely forgetting that she can just move that pawn up and kind of fortify the center as much as possible. I then protect this pawn because I want to get this rook into the game. And then I completely forget that I freaking just hung my knight. And so all advantage I have, like I almost lost it. So, but I was able to get it back, but all my pieces are here on the back rank. So I've like undeveloped a lot of my pieces. I still have a slight lead, but it's not as good. And then I put my bishop here. The rook comes there. I castle. They trade and she wins the pawn. I get my knight here and she gets her rook on the 7th rank. Not so great. So I try to defend that pawn. She's now got the advantage now and she's gonna, get her knight into the game. I get my knight over here to c4, kind of trying to get this rook trapped here. Push this pawn up to unpin the rook, or make it so I no longer have to defend with this. We trade the pawns off. And then from here, I should have gone rook to a2, get on their 7th rank, go here and like launch a counterattack on my own. Instead, I push f6, trying to like break out of some way. She then just takes my pawn and now I'm down 2 pawns. Oh, I'm down 1 pawn, I guess. I got the other pawn back. But it just opened up my whole like back rank. And now I'm like reeling. And we do this dance for a very long time. And the thing with over the board tournaments is I have to record my moves, right? So we get to this position and from what I wrote down, she went c6 check. And I know that didn't happen for a reason because that was completely winning for me. Oh wait, no, it's winning for her. So she goes here. No, she did go here. I then took, she then pushed, or she went, oh no, she did go rook to c8 check. I then went h7. And then we like fought, but at the end, she ended up getting her queen. I ended up losing. So I start off 0.5 after 2 rounds. I'm not happy with how I played in that game. And she is still, after 3 games, up 3 games on me. This 12-year-old is the bane of my chess career. I don't know if I'll ever be able to beat her, but I'm gonna get her one of these days. The time control Dark Knight chess is 15 plus 5. So they're like longer, rapid games. Something I'm not usually used to playing, but in all of these games, I basically took all of my time. So I was very happy with my time control. Yeah, playing kids scares me as well, bro. All right, so in my 3rd game, I'm obviously in the loser's bracket now, or the loser side of the Swiss tournament, because now I'm playing another guy I played in the past. I've actually, I've won twice against him, but I'm white here. He's a 699. I go e4. He goes into a modern defense. So I just try to take up as much as the center as possible. Looking to get my knights out here, push, try to castle queenside. That's usually my plan in a modern defense. So I'm getting my knights out, getting my bishops in, trying to fortify this as much as possible. They get their knights out. I'm just developing. They bring this here and I push up. Now, I realized I did this wrong because after the knight comes here, what I should have done is I should have taken with the bishop. They take with the pawn here. I take with the knight, and then you can't really take with the bishop here because the queen takes. I mean, you could, but I'm looking at that, and that's not good for my opponent. Instead, I take with the knight and completely forget that he can take there. I take the knight, damage my structure. Now I have like this weird pawn center. He's now taking a slight lead. And I get my queen out here. And this is real bad because when I did this queen move, he's able to get this check in. I didn't want to move my king here or here because if I do that, I lose my queen. So I move my king over here to D2. Bishop comes here anyways. I say, great, let's offer queen. Good rule of thumb is when you're being attacked, trade off the pieces. They bring another check here. I just get my king out. I'm looking to get it on the queen side and be completely safe. Queen comes out here. I then hang my rook because I, for some reason, want to get my rook here, not realizing that I just hung it. But he doesn't see that. He castles instead. I then say, let's trade this off. We trade that off. He brings his rooks into the party. I trade off queens. And this is another one of my moves that I was not proud of. I should have gone knight to c3 at this point. But instead I go, no. All right, so we trade off. He brings the rook here. I'm supposed to go knight to c3, but instead I trade off the queens. I bring out h4. That's what I did. Thinking, hey, this is covered, so I'm fine, but not realizing that, one, I just left that pawn hanging. I then go and attack the rook, but then we trade off the rooks and he wins a pawn from there. And he's in a good spot. Brings up the rook. I want to get my knight here to fork this, but it's going to be real hard getting that. So I just protect that knight as much as possible, trying to keep that possibility open. He then attacks it. I just bring my knight back over here to c3. He brings there. I bring it back and then realize that's now covering the rook. I hide my king. He brings the bishop over there. I bring my king over here, try to save it as much as possible, and then get it here. There's a lot of king moves in this game. So he brings the pawn up here. I take with my pawn. He throws the check here. I bring my king here. It's the only place I can bring it, and I lose my knight. But I say I'm going to attack the bishop instead. So we can trade this, and we're like about an even endgame. He's up a pawn, and he has a better structure than me, and I'm just dropping a second pawn here. So I'm like, great. I'm definitely losing at this point. I don't know how I'm gonna finagle my way out of this one. So I push up instead. I'm trying to get something going. He throws me in check. I go here. He goes here to h5, looking to take this d5 pawn. There's no way to save it. So I say, screw it, push forward. I'm hoping he just takes here. I take here, and then, you know, try to promote as much as possible. He takes instead. That pawn's now trapped. So I try to get my king over here. He takes. I get the king. I'm just trying to keep my pawns alive as much as possible. I threaten a king check. He brings the king over there. I check anyways. He brings the king down. I'm now threatening this pawn. Pawn comes down here. I bring this king. I don't want to trade just yet because this is a good pass pawn to have right here. 2, I want this king to be a little farther down so that it's not going to be an issue with, you know, playing in the future. He pushes this pawn and I throw a check here, move the king down, and then I offer the rook trade. We trade the rooks. He brings that down. And then I'm able to get my king down in time, which then allows me to push here. If he pushes there, I go here. So it forces the king to come down here. I push. He comes here. I push again. And then he pushes his king here. Granted, for the past like 10 moves, he's had 10 seconds on the clock. So he's had to blitz this out. But I think he thought that for some reason that I was going to take this. I queen, he queens, and then I get the checkmate on the next move. So I win by the skin of my teeth. Yeah, what a blunder. And it was really unfortunate for him because there was a lot of people watching our game because it was the last game because we were all the way down on time. And so he was feeling real bad, especially since he was winning that game. So I got very lucky in the third game. I now go into my last game here. I'm playing as black. And the guy I'm playing this is his first over the board tournament ever. But I'm talking to him beforehand. He's a 2100 on Lee Chess. So what is that? Like a 1700, 1800 on chess.com? Got me a little bit scared, to be honest with you. So I'm like, okay, I just want to get to 2.5. That was my goal. And all of these tournaments, I haven't gotten to 2.5 before. I've always like been at 2 in these quick tournaments, especially with these higher level players. If I can get 2.5, I'll be happy. So he starts off with d4. I go into like my King's Indian setup, but then he goes into c4. And you know, last week when we went over our opening, we went with the Budapest Gambit, and I was finding a lot of success with that. So I went in with the Budapest Gambit here on e5. He takes, I go in here, and he was very confused after that. He's like, what? And so I don't think he's ever seen the Budapest Gambit, which I thought was very interesting. But he played all the main moves because you push this, they push there. You bring the other knight out because you're looking to trade and get this. Get your pawn back. He brings that out. You castle. He brought his knight out here. And that's when I decided to take the pawn back. You have this structure here. And what I'm wanting to do now is I'm wanting to get this pawn up here, get this rook over here, bring the queen over, attack the king side. That's what you're trying to do with the Budapest Gambit. You're trying to be very aggressive. You want to bring out this rook because if you push a4, and this knight comes here, if this rook's here, you can't really bring this bishop back. But when that rook's is moved, I can bring my bishop over here to f8. He goes here, and I realize this battery is looking at this very not fun to have checkmate, especially after this knight comes over here. So I go knight to g6. Knight comes over here, attacking my bishop. I just bring it back to f8 like I was planning on. He then opens this up, looking to fianchetto's bishop. I'm trying to get my other light squared bishop out, which I do. I pin it. He then defends the knight. And then I push here to c6, looking to push here and get the knight. He castles. And then I say, ooh, there's a pawn here if I can have it. He sacks the knight. I take it. The queen takes the bishop. I then take this pawn. I have this little battery here. King comes back into the corner. Hey, Colin. So complete dead even at this point. I bring my bishop out here to protect this pawn. They bring their light squared bishop here, trying to, I don't know what they're doing at this point. I bring my queen here, offer a queen trade. Say, you're attacking me. Let's just get the queens off the board. I like my position otherwise. He says, no, I'm going to go into your back rank. I'm going to take b7. I'm going to take c6. Nothing you can really do about it. I move over here to d2, saying, I'll take your bishop. I'll get this rook on the 7th rank. I'll bully your king. He takes there. I just take with the f pawn. He now then brings his bishop here, looking to get this free pawn. And I say, great. I will then go on the 7th rank here. I'm gonna attack your king. He then defends the king, which is unfortunate. And so what I do is I open this pawn, trying to get this bishop activated, attacking here. He doesn't see that. He takes the b7 pawn instead. I take the rook. He takes my rook. I then push my king to g4. At this point, I have a slight advantage. I think the best move here, I was thinking queen to a7. Great, because now I can get my bishop here. If he goes here, I can't get my bishop here. I'm hoping he takes c6 so I can get my bishop here and really threaten this attack. He then takes on c7, and I say, great. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trade this off. If I take here and take here, I have this, and then I have checkmate. That's what I'm thinking. He then pushes up to h8. I take the check here. He takes there. I throw this here because I didn't want to necessarily throw here just yet. Because if the king goes here, I don't know. I felt like I wouldn't be able to get a checkmate. King goes there anyways. I then throw the check here, forcing this pawn to come up. Pawn comes here. I take the pawn there. He only has one place to go, and it's checkmate. So I beat a stronger opponent than me and drew against a stronger opponent than me in this tournament. I was very happy with my results. I finished with 2.5, and my rating went from, as you can see here, let's blow it up. I'm right here. I finished 6th in the tournament, but I went from 944 and pushed up to 1052. So I was very happy. I finally broke the 1,000 berry and over the board chest, and I'm very happy. So that's the analysis for all the games for the tournament. If you like that video, please like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll come out with over the board tournament recaps, trying to come out with them weekly, as long as some other chess content as well. So the next tournament recap will be here. We'll see you next time, and you have a great day. Goodbye.